Hi everyone, welcome back to the shop. It is a balmy 45-degree day in December, and I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to do kind of my end of the year video slash shop tour, as that's what you do when you're a random woodworker on YouTube. I haven't really walked through the particulars of my shop. I know you've seen lots of it being built or being used in various videos, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to really kind of do a walkabout, explain my tools, explain how I have things set up and why everything's the way it is, or why it's not the way it isn't. Let's start with my main wall behind me. This is a pegboard paneled cabinet that I built based on a design of Measured Workshop, which is another great YouTuber you should all check out. I am not a big adherent to pegboard. I don't really like it. I hate that the pegs fall out sometimes. I don't think it's as convenient as it's kind of made out to be. I know there are better ways to do it. It's just not really my thing. I would rather have firmly attached things in their set location once I determine where that is. French cleats are better. I use them a little bit here because I wanted to experiment with them. I'm not crazy about them. They're helpful, I guess. But again, I'd rather just have everything in its place, and that's where it lives. Easier said than done in a small shop. But it's a pretty straightforward cabinet. The door's open. Hinge needs to be oiled, but you get the idea. The inside of this one in particular is a catastrophe. It's where I keep most of my measuring and marking tools, tape measures, and various small levels and rulers here, combination squares, a couple utility knives, calipers. I built this to try to be sort of flexible with my space and to fit a lot of my kind of common use tools up, and for that it's been excellent. You can see I've got all my main use saws right here, as well as hearing protection. This one I really go to a lot. It's got my basic screwdrivers, speed square, my main framing hammer. This brush, honestly, is one of my most used tools just to keep everything clean. It's all very handy. And then this thing can slide back and forth. Rather than using actual T-track, and again I took this idea from Measured Workshop, these are like curtain rods for a window, and I just used a wide-headed nail in the back of these stacked as a rudder. I'm sure there are other ways you could do it that are more effective at the same price point, but this was easy and it was stuff I had on hand. Inside here, this is my little French cleat section. Again, not crazy about French cleats or any of these sort of super modular storage. I'd rather make a tool mount that I can screw to the wall, and if I need to move it, I can unscrew it and put it somewhere else. That's how I operate. But it's handy for what it is. I've got ratchet set, random pencils and pens, dowel jig that doesn't work that I need to fix, all my pliers and snips and that sort of thing, a couple marking tools, my little carving hatchet, my mallet, which I made in a previous video. This is actually my most viewed video, over 300 views. How about that? I don't know why, but I guess people like mallets. The last section of this cabinet obviously has all my seat clamps here. And then this is why I don't like pegboard. And then most of my glues and other consumables go in there. Up top on here is where I've ended up putting all my various stains, finishes, oils, paint. Just keeps it out of the way, but still easy access when I need to use it. You can also see the old level that I restored, the level that is almost to the day 100 years older than I am. You can also see I've got my various screw and hardware storage over here. This is all my dad's, although a lot of the hardware is mine. Yeah, that's another thing I should mention about this workshop. So it's in my parents' garage. They have sort of a 2.5 car garage, and my workshop takes up about half of the half. I am planning on moving out and buying my own place within a few months, if all goes well. And so I built this space knowing that it was going to be a somewhat temporary thing, you know, a year, year and a half at the longest. And so there's a lot of things I did here that are A, built to be fairly temporary and not necessarily the permanent way that I want them forever, and B, as sort of a trial run for when I have my own proper workshop and I want to do it up properly in the way I want to do it. Anyway, so hardware's there. I conveniently had enough space for a paper towel roll. This thing is so helpful. If you have a workshop, you should just have paper towels available, and it was convenient that it fit in exactly the right spot. Over here I have my various other saws, my old pull saw, a handful of kind of random clamps and levels. It's easy access to that stuff, especially things like squeeze clamps, which you just need for a few minutes here and there. There's also this shelf, which my dad put in a long time ago, which holds various wrenches, some more clamps, hot glue gun, a couple random. There's not a huge amount of rhyme or reason to this space because it was sort of my dad's home repair DIY workshop, which pretty much consisted of this bench and this wall that I've since expanded to make it more into a woodworking shop. And it will return to being, you know, a DIY shop when I leave. There's elements that I've been able to mess with and elements that I haven't, and so there's some sort of mixed use stuff going on here. I think we make it work pretty well, but it's just the way it is for now. This corner of the workbench, I don't like to talk about this corner, I never film it, but this is just where random assorted tools live that I don't have room for somewhere else, or I haven't bothered making a proper spot for. Longer hand planes, I've got a weight, I've got a box full of dowels, a couple of those clamping square things. It's not really usable space over here as far as the worktop goes, just because it's in the corner, so I just put stuff there and it lives there for months and months until I get sick of it and put it somewhere else. I should also show this area underneath the main workbench. This is most of where my dad's tools live, as well as some of the hardware and implements he has. Underneath here there are a couple bins full of plumbing and electrical parts. I don't really use them, except for when I ran the wiring in here. They're good to have if you're a homeowner, and so it's good to keep those somewhere. I built this very quick and dirty, very ugly little chest of drawers here. This holds kind of miscellaneous hardware, sandpaper, and then this is just a catch-all for whatever crap I have. I have a lot of casters and old screwdrivers in here right now. But yeah, this is really where stuff goes to die. If stuff ends up behind this sort of first row of retrievability, it's gone forever. And so I'm sure when I go to clean this out when I move, it's going to be just potpourri of nonsense. Alright, so I actually have a cameraman now for the very first time. This is very exciting. My brother Chris is volunteered to help. Thank you, Chris. Moving on to sort of the broader view of the shop. I say the shop is about 150 square feet. It's sort of difficult to measure because it's not just a square. I've got this area over here, which is the bulk of my shop. Obviously, I also have my lathe over here, which I haven't shown on camera before, but that's my lathe. We'll talk about that more later. There's also an attic space up above where my dust collector lives, and some other storage happens. I also have this loft space up and over everything where I keep a lot of larger lumber, as well as the pre-separator for said dust collector. Talking for a second about my dust collection system, I do have a video about it, but in essence, I bought a vastly overpowered, stationary dust collector that currently lives up in the attic. A, because this is a working garage, and so having cars in and out that are always covered in dust is just a pain, so trying to cut down on that. Also, I hate cleaning, so cutting down on the amount of dust in the air is always good. Plus, breathing is helpful. It's vastly overpowered for a couple reasons. A, because eventually I'm going to move into a bigger shop, and I want it to work for, be future-proof for a while. B, because I knew there was going to be a lot of travel in between the actual point of collection and where the dust collector is, including this pre-separator. So at its farthest, you've got probably about 20 feet of piping, plus the pre-separator, plus another 10-15 feet going up into the attic. Meaning there's just a lot of ground that air has to cover to generate good suction, and it still works pretty well. It has some issues, namely I've used very cheap blast gates for most of these tools, which get clogged up and don't actually seal all that well, which, that's what I get for being cheap on that. But for the most part, it all works. I also had to install this piping in sort of a, let's call it janky way, because it needs to be removable, so when I move I can still reuse most of this piping and fittings. Alright, let's start talking about some specific tools. Lathe first. I haven't really filmed with this at all because I'm still very much learning how to use it, but Santa brought me a nice Nova chuck, and I've been playing with it a lot. It is, as you can tell, a Rockwell 11-inch wood lathe. I can't really find many of these on the market. I don't know specifically what they were intended for. Obviously it's a longer bed, so I imagine it was done with spindle turning in mind. I mean, chair legs and that sort of thing. But it's a kind of cool looking piece of machinery. It's worked really well for me. Nothing too fancy, but I got a good deal on it used from a guy that was moving, including all the tools and all that fun stuff. So it's been a delight, and as soon as I figure out how to film this without the camera rattling all over the place, I will definitely be putting some videos out using this. You can also see I built just a quick and dirty little tool wall that holds all of my turning tools, and various calipers and wrenches and things that all come into play. I need to expand it now that I have this chuck and all the accessories that come with it. But then we have my table saw. As with pretty much any woodworking workshop, this is the heart of the shop. When there's a car parked here, it's essentially where the camera is right now, and then I have an aisle that's about 2 feet wide that I can use this saw at. So that's sort of the advantage of being in a garage, is that it gives you some flexible space where if you move the car you have more room to maneuver and things. And you've seen in previous videos when I've been doing larger furniture, I'll use this area right here as sort of my assembly area. Not ideal, but it's definitely better than being stuck in a smaller room where I just don't have that kind of flexibility, so I'm very grateful for that. This table saw is pretty much the only larger tool that I bought new. It is a Delta contractor saw. It's not a stellar table saw by any means. It's not a Powermatic, it's not a saw stop, anything like that. But it's got a cast iron table, the fence is rock solid. It's been pretty precise for everything that I've been doing. It's not like I'm doing real cabinet making or anything. And once I changed the blade on it, it's been really just top notch to work with. It moves easily. It's got a nice little foot pedal that lowers the wheel so you can move it around. I don't really do that, but it's nice to have the option. The one thing I really don't like are these stamped steel extension wings. They're fine, but they don't stay flat and they kind of bubble up every now and then. Everyone has the same complaint about stamped steel wings. I don't know why they don't just make them out of thicker steel. They don't have to be cast iron to be flat, but they could at least be thicker steel that has some reinforcement in it so it's not warping all the time. But pretty small quibble in what is otherwise a pretty good piece of kit there. Right behind it, I keep my router table. This is from Rockler. This is one of several tools that I inherited from my great uncle Ed, who passed away last year. And his family and his direct family had no use for his tools, so they let me come and have my pick of a few different things. This is a wonderful router table. I have no objections to it. I don't really use routers all that often. I don't have a ton of experience with them, but I'm learning a lot more, and having this has definitely helped. It's also nice to have the extra storage underneath it. You can see I've got my bits, I've got random accessories, all sorts of other tools, my Dremel stuff I keep down there. I have a very janky dust collection setup. This is my sort of catch-all flex hose that I use for a handful of different tools as I need to. It's not great, but it prevents most of the chips from going flying everywhere, so that's pretty much the goal. Here I have my bandsaw. It is a Delta 14-inch bandsaw. It's a 28-276, which I totally knew and didn't have to look for right now. I also keep my rare earth magnets there to keep a smile on my face. This, as well as my jointer and my planer, were sort of the first major purchases I made in establishing my workshop. I bought them off of another gentleman who was moving, who was local. This bandsaw, I currently have I believe a 3/4 inch blade on it, because I mostly do resaw work and kind of heavier cutting with this. I don't do a ton of the kind of delicate scroll work that you would need a narrower blade on, so this works fine. It took me a long time, and I blame mostly my inexperience more than the tool itself, to get this calibrated in any sort of way where the blade wasn't flying off or, causing problems. And I've got it pretty well dialed in now. I'm terrified when I have to change this blade that it's all going to go to heck in a handbasket, but it's what it is for now. The dust collection on it is not great, which I do blame the bandsaw for. What a lot of modern bandsaws do is they'll have a port somewhere along here that allows for either another shop vac or just for extra airflow. And I might make that modification one day, but for now it's adequate. It gets most of the fine dust, which is what matters. As I mentioned, I also got the Delta jointer. It's a 6-inch jointer, straight knife from the same guy that sold me the bandsaw. You notice I have a lot of Delta and Rockwell tools. That's mostly coincidence, but I figure it might as well be consistent while I go through. Not that Delta manufacturing is consistent at all. It's a perfectly fine little machine. It really needs new blades, which is on me. I just haven't changed them in a while, or sharpened them. Really no major issues with it, except for when the blades are really dull as they are now, and it just doesn't really work. I will say one thing I desperately hate, and it's not the tool, but it's the little wheeled stand that it comes with, has what I call my ankle buster right here, which is just this little thing that levers the wheel up. To keep the wheel down, it has to be like this, and given that this is my main thoroughfare through the workshop, I have hit my ankle on this dozens of times. It's awful, and I hate it. Eventually, when it's living in its new shop, I will probably take it off the mobile base and or reorganize it so it makes more sense and doesn't hurt me. This is my main wood scrap collection area. It's a mess. It's a disaster. Don't stack your wood like this. This is mostly just random construction projects, and most of it's my dad's scrap wood from just projects around the house, so I don't interfere with it too much. I try to use it when I can, just to clear out space. The miter saw station has sort of also become a catch-all area. This is my dad's chop saw, but I do have my own. It's just in storage until I move. I built these little table lift things here just to help with heavier stock. They're not attached to anything, but they help keep my chisel set and a couple other things. Behind it, I have my metal cutting bandsaw stand. This stand I built when I lived in Texas in an apartment. It's not great, but it does technically work. As you can see, I do need a new blade on the bandsaw. I don't use that all that much. It's nice to have when I do have it, but eventually I will be rebuilding this to be less of a nightmare. 6-inch buffer from Harbor Freight, nothing fancy about that. 6-inch bench grinder from Craftsman. I built a little sort of handle stand for it, mostly because when I'm using the lathe, I have to go back and sharpen things every now and then. It's nice to be able to move it to somewhere more convenient. I've had a whole video on this, the flip-top cart that houses my little combination sander and my Delta planer, so go watch that video. This cart is probably not going to come with me whenever I move because it is not the most sturdy thing that I've ever constructed. It does the job just fine and I'm not worried about it falling apart. But I think with what I know now I can do a considerably better job at it. But it's a good way to minimize the footprint of a couple different machines that I almost never use simultaneously. Bog standard Craftsman 8-inch drill press. I have my own upgraded version of this, which is with my other miter saw in storage until I move. So this is my dad's. But this is a real workhorse of a machine. I've pretty much never had any problems with it. We've had it at least as long as I've been alive. And it's just a solid piece of kit. I built this little thing that rests on the top that holds the vise and a couple common use bits. And then in here I've put in just a couple of drawer boxes from cabinets that we weren't using, sideways, because that's how they fit, where I keep bits and other kind of accessories that go with it. This area is pretty much all bits except for my diamond sharpening stones here. In here I have a lot of other random stuff, Forstner bits, a couple pouches, some other screwdriver bits, and yeah, just a mess. But that brings us pretty much full circle. I also have a power tool storage shelf. No real method to this madness, but it keeps that stuff out of the way, and it's easy access. So I keep all my files and rasps in a bucket. Some longer clamps here. My first attempt at a hand tool wall. I actually really like this. I think they're very satisfying to make and to use. So eventually, when I have my own space, I will be expanding that and making that kind of my own. Just a quick shot of my long-term lumber storage, my bigger pieces. Last couple things, I have the corner of disaster over here. Drill and driver, charging station, random tape, random other tools hung up various places on the wall. The air compressor lives here. Air compressor tools live in this little thing. I don't like this corner, I don't like anything about it, but it's kind of a catch-all for whatever fits. And yeah, that's pretty much the tiny workshop. Again, it's 150-ish square feet. It does everything that I need it to do. It's not as convenient as I would like in a lot of ways, and definitely has a lot of ways it can be improved. But given that I just started working with this stuff in just shy of a year ago now, I think it's come a long way, and obviously it can be improved further. This concludes then my first and probably only shop tour in this space. I might do a brief walkthrough before I move, but we'll see what happens when we get there. And yeah, I hope to see you next year in a bigger and better shop. So thank you again for watching ever so much, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.